guys, welcome back to Cash Flow Confidence. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about the fact that your profit does not exist in your profit and loss. It exists in your pricing strategy. So let me break that down. When I start working with clients, the first thing I do is take a look at their pricing because 9 times out of 10, it's not as high as it needs to be. And I don't say that just to say like, oh, I'll make everybody raise their prices and then, price everybody else out of work. That's not what happens. Instead, what happens is I look at prices and I look at all the inputs that go into their offers. And then I say, okay, let's say, you want a 75% gross margin or a 60% gross margin. But after factoring in all of your materials and labor and things that you have to pay for in order to sell this, whatever it is, your gross margin is sitting around like 30%. That's an issue. Okay, so we reverse engineer pricing. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that. Like I said, the first one is more direct. It's all the direct costs that go into carrying out your service, okay? The next thing that you need to factor into your pricing is your amount of overhead. And so whatever it is that you're paying for that cannot be reduced or, made more efficient, the things that you have to pay for to keep business running, like rent and things like that, we factor that into your pricing. The next thing we look at is what your desired net profit margin is. Say that's 20%. So in order for you to achieve a 20% net profit, what does everything else above that line need to be? One of the things above that line that I touched on in the last episode is your owner's salary, because chances are it's a lot lower than what it needs to be, because we as business owners are very inclined to say, okay, money's coming in, but I'm going to throw it at this and I'm going to invest in this and I'm going to buy this equipment. And meanwhile, we haven't given ourselves a raise in like 5 years. Would you expect that from an employer if you were working a 9 to 5? Absolutely not. Okay, so we look at owner's salary. I harp on this a lot because I feel like when we start a business, we have some kind of exit plan in mind. It may not be, to sell the business, or it may be to sell the business, but we all want a business that pretty much runs without us. In order to do that, we have to be paying ourselves a salary that is consistent, if not more than what we would be expecting to be paid if we worked in a 9 to 5 setting. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. We look at your salary, we factor that in. Now, say we factor all these things in and we find that your net profit is gonna be about 5% of revenue. That's when we raise prices, because whatever prices you're charging cannot support a business that runs on cannot support a 20% net profit business. If that's the case, now's the time to raise your prices. And obviously, communicating price increases is not the funnest thing in the world. Sometimes it's kind of awkward. It's kind of up to you as a business owner if you are going to, I recommend raising your prices at least once every 2 years, but you need to be auditing your prices at least once a year. That doesn't mean you need to raise them, but I would suggest, once every 2 years, raising your prices. What you can do is just say for whatever new clients come on, they're going to come on at this price, but you can keep your existing ones grandfathered in if that means a lot to you. If not, just let them know, hey, we've invested in a bunch of new things that are going to help the business be able to serve you better. And so it's resulted in a price increase. That's happened to me a few times with some of my vendors, and I've never been weird about it. I'm just like, okay, cool. You know what I mean? So do that. So we looked at all the direct costs that go into your pricing and then how to adjust it such that your net profit margin is, 20% or whatever it is you want it to be. The next thing I want to look at is not so much dollar amounts, but I want you to think about how many hours a week you want to be working and how many hours a week that your company spends on client delivery. Factor all those hours in because that's going to affect your pricing as well. So let's say, you've got enough capacity that your team can spend 30 hours a week each on client delivery. Well, you're paying them X amount per hour, or if they're on salary, figure out what that hourly pay is, and then use that to kind of factor into, okay, well, I know my prices need to be this so that they can stay at 30 hours a week of client delivery because, we've got to save some hours for team meetings and just like admin things. So use your prices to determine, or use your capacity hours to determine what your pricing needs to be in order to meet those salary requirements, including your own salary. And so your profit really starts with pricing. If your pricing is too low, you're not going to see the profit that you require. And instead, what you're going to see is a burnt out team, a business that you hate, and you're going to wind up in a cash flow situation like I talked about a couple episodes ago where you've got all these things expected to come out and your cash just is not there. Okay. So in that episode, I talked about a lot of things beyond pricing, but it does start with pricing. Make sure your pricing is in alignment with the business that you expect to have. That's all I have for this week. See you guys next week.